showing the protagonist crying. He wondered how his father could have died and held a box of virtual reality glasses. He was very sad and wondered how he would live without him, and he began to scream and cry, and in front of him was his father. Unfortunately, he had taken his life, and they called him San Juan. The protagonist was at his funeral when two men approached him. Those men call him and call protagonist. They asked if they could have a conversation for a minute because they went there to investigate what had happened yesterday, and asked him if before Mr. Chun died, his father had told him something, but he said that if he had known that this was going to happen, he would not have gone. But he does not finish talking, and the detective ends up asking why the protagonist would not be saying that his father was too worried, and 12 years ago, his mother died when he was only 5 years old, so he did not understand the seriousness of the situation, and he did not know how or why his father did not want to tell him. Somehow he became a little strange after that. If he had known that this was going to happen, he would not have done it, but he does not finish saying that he would not have done it. The scene cuts to a man who goes with the child, saying that they would go to the kindergarten, calling the protagonist his name, but in the end he asks him to wait a minute and wonders if he turned off the gas at home, and ends up asking suddenly if he did not know, and asks the protagonist to wait while he quickly verifies if he turned it off correctly until he picks up a grid and begins to look at the protagonist. He explained that after that more than an hour passed, and the agent said that Prota's father had a serious case and said that growing up as a father made him very cowardly. He also suffered a lot of bullying. They would hit him and laugh at him, and saying that had not even hit him, he had already started and he was already like that. They said that the protagonist was an idiot who could not maintain his posture for a while and raised his hands while the protagonist was scared, and another said that this was true. The boy in the middle said that he was the son of a psychopath, and the fat guy spoke saying that a woman was cursed. He said that he was famous in the neighborhood, saying that he would let the gas and that the firefighters was in his house 3 times, and that boy said that it was a disaster, and another asked him to stop doing it if his father did not have a job, while the fat guy said that he had been unemployed for a long time, and if he asked who the hell would hire such a person, everyone in the neighborhood hated him, and that is why he had no job, and the fat kid asked if he could move. Another said that they would feel bothered by his mere existence. The other opposite said that he had lost his balance again out of fear, and someone else said that it is a pity that he could not even hit him, while the protagonist was helpless. The scene cuts to a building, and protagonist's father was sitting, saying that he knew that this was going to happen. He said that he had fallen again and could have been in trouble if he had reversed it in her. He said that that day the horoscope said that his luck with the money was also scarce, and begins to bite his nails, saying that he only had 400,000 in his bank account, and said that that should be enough until the protagonist ends up arriving home and tells his father that he had returned, until he looks at his son and calls him and asks him if he brought an umbrella, but the prota said no because it had not even rained, and his father was a little nervous. He said that he still needed to load it because the prediction said that there was a 40% chance of rain that day, but the protagonist told him to stop doing that, and his father said that if he had known that this was going to happen, he would have put it in his bag in the morning, but the protagonist told him to stop because he was already bored. He begins to get nervous and says that the owner of the house already wants them to leave the residence. He even commented that he did not want people like them living in that house. The protagonist's father said that he knew that this was going to happen because the night before he had had a lucid dream, and that was what had happened, and the protagonist was already getting nervous and asked him to stop saying it as if he knew or had thought. He wonders why he has to be so paranoid like that. He ends up asking if he knew that day was his birthday, and his father only says yes. The protagonist is simply very nervous and turns around telling him to stop worrying about his personal life and begins to worry about things, because certainly his father even tries to call him, but it does not help much. Protagonist continues to say that he can't live with him embarrassing him all the time, and if he has eyes if for him to see in the mirror. His father is very surprised by this, while the embarrassed continues to ask if he could not be brave for a moment so that he begins to live like a normal human, but embarrassed simply says that he would die if he lived that way, and his father tries to tell him to wait a little because he is very nervous, but he simply ignores him, and his father stands there looking at himself in the mirror quite nervous. Then the scene cuts back to the hospital in the present, and a man tells another that he found the suicide note of Chum, and the other is surprised with that written. I already knew that was what you wanted as a birthday gift, but now I know what you want. and this is my last gift for you. I don't know if you'll like it, because I can't protect you until the end. I'm sorry," he added. "That was your father's last note. He also said that he would like to have his mother to help, but unfortunately, that's not how it happened." While Silver was crying, he hoped that the protagonist was happy and alive, and I will be praying for him. He said that the path ahead was clear and that protagonist could walk freely on it. The scene cut, and the protagonist was climbing a ladder until a lady caught his attention. She said that if he couldn't pay the rent, she would have to vacate the room soon, because she realized that he had nothing for the apartment. She also said that the night before someone had also died, and she couldn't rent the room with that rumor. And she was upset about that. While protagonist just didn't say anything. He enters the house and she says that it is difficult for him to tell him to leave. It is not as if his situation did not matter to anyone because no one cares. And he looked down with those virtual glasses at 7:49. He said that at least there was someone who cared about him, and he was the only one. He said that this was his last birthday gift and he was grateful for it on behalf of his father. And he continues to open the present at that time. He found that the entire virtual reality team was inside. He begins to cry, saying that it was really his father's last gift and that he would definitely use it. He would make good use of that. He puts on his glasses and says that he did not need to have followed that path, until suddenly his father appears in his vision and obviously scares him so much that he ends up screaming and taking off his glasses. He wonders what is happening until the glasses speak, asking him to please put them on again. He really didn't know what was going on while the device kept telling him to put them back on. The head? I didn't believe it, but in the end, at 8:45, he puts them back on and asks if it really was his father. But his father just wants the system to say that the visualization was starting and he really doesn't understand what that means. His father's image says he is at level 1 right now and would evaluate his skills. He says that Prota's best skill is visualization per minute, but Prota obviously doesn't understand much and asks how it is possible. His father's image says he has a skill available and would be added automatically, until his vision begins to distort slowly and a woman appears sitting on a bench. The protagonist obviously asks who that person is, and she says she met him when he was a child and it is not strange that he does not remember. At that moment, she says that, anyway, that is the money that her father told her to give her. He also said that he loved her very much and it was to use in subsistence expenses. The protagonist tries to understand everything, but he still can't understand everything. And she tells him to pick it up quickly, pointing at the money. He looks at the money and sees the face of a woman, gets a little scared when he sees that and all the money falls to the ground. He wonders what that is and if that money was real. Then he screams and ends up dizzying the system. His father's visualization says that his visualization skill has been used and is now in recharge mode. Shortly after, he disappears, and Prota even tries to call him, calling him dad to wait, but it doesn't work very well. Finally, he takes off his glasses and really doesn't understand anything. He wonders if this is a dream or a hallucination. Maybe it's just not right. He says he really was his father, there was no doubt about it, and asks what had happened there. Also, the glasses didn't want to turn on either. He begins to think that they may be broken and that is all he knows for now. But, obviously, he says that this is very strange and comments that if he had all those debts, he could not have left him all that money. It was probably some hallucination he had, until someone asks from the door if there was someone at home and is surprised, since he didn't expect visitors. He opens the door and asks who that woman is, because he really doesn't know her. She asks if he is Shunui and comments that he really grew up, then asks if he can come in for a minute. After that, she comes in and comments that she has not heard about him. Until that afternoon, she said she was very sorry. She commented that it must have been very difficult for him, that he couldn't even imagine it. She said she never thought he would leave him that way, alone. Silver begins to think that maybe she was right and wonders if she was the person he saw the night before. She ends up asking him who he was, and she comments that she saw him when he was very young, and it was normal that he did not remember her. It was obvious, he said, that anyway, his father asked him to give him that money and she said that she thought his father loved him very much for everything he did. So he asked her to use it for subsistence expenses as soon as possible. She ends up giving him that money, and obviously he is very surprised. She asks him to take it quickly, but he is really stammering and without any reaction. She ends up putting the money in his hand and tells him that, anyway, she left him her business card in case he had a problem or something like that. When he opens the package to see the money, he gets scared and ends up screaming. The woman says that she was busy that day with work, so she will leave it with him, but he asks her again to wait because honestly, he doesn't even. She did not know who he really was and asks him how he could give such a large amount of money as it is, but she simply said that everything was fine, that he could handle it alone. She commented that he was only paying a debt that he had with his parents, and that is why she gave him that amount of money. After a while, he looked at that money and wondered if it made sense, because it didn't make any sense until a woman ends up calling him, asking him to open that door. She seemed to be quite nervous and asked him if something unexpected had happened, but she only said that she needed to show the room to another buyer that day. She said it smelled pretty bad and asked if he was cleaning the room, except the room. She begins to say that she would have to redecorate the entire room until the protagonist says that was his rent late, and she is surprised that he has money. He asks if it was not enough because he was right there, and comments that while he pays the rent, that house would still be his. He said he was very busy and asked him to leave. After a while, he began to see how much money he still had, and if he spent it in moderation, he could live a few more months. Well, he starts looking at a wallet and says that it is from the police department, investigator Sinidos. He is surprised that that woman was a police officer and had many doubts about how he knew his father, because he did not have the opportunity to ask him that since he was quite in shock. He also said that there was something else and began to look at those glasses. He said that those gloves are the controllers and there was also a charger. He ends up connecting the charger to those virtual glasses and comments that he thought he would only need to charge that and then it would turn on normally. Some time passes and it was already late at night. He comments that he had been charging for more than 10 hours, but it still seemed that it was not working. He ends up taking the glasses in his hand and was thinking of going to the repair center, since he also had school the next day. But suddenly, the virtual glasses tell him to put them on with the device in his head and ends up getting scared because he did not expect it while wearing the glasses. The device kept telling him to put the device in his head and wonder if that device was already working normally. He ends up putting on his gloves and glasses, and the Ava system that was starting, it realizes that his father has reappeared in front of him. He begins to talk to that hologram that was his father and asks him if he could not see him, but the hologram simply says that the command is invalid and Prota cannot understand much, until the hologram says that he has leveled up and congratulates him. Powered by Dubverse. He also says that the currently available skills were the previous detailed view of the worst that would happen the next day, and he does not quite understand. He asks the hologram if the previous night was the best, but the hologram simply says that the command is unknown. Even so, he comments that he only had one skill available and that the skill would be activated automatically, but the protagonist tries to tell him to wait a minute. Although his vision gets blurry and goes back to reality, the scene cuts to a building. He was at school and wonders what was happening, until a boy told the other to pass it on and asked him if he was an idiot because he was still not passing. But the other said that he did not know how to play and said that he was simply sick, and the boy in the white shirt. He gets nervous, grabbing the neck of the other and asking what he had said. The boy in the black shirt said that he was the first to insult and that is why he also insulted. And the protagonist was watching from afar and said that it seemed very real, until a rock ends up falling on his head. Obviously it falls on the ground with the head bleeding, and those three crazy individuals were upstairs. The one in the middle said that he was only going to throw it. The one on the left asked scared if he had died, and Proto was slowly losing consciousness. The system ended up warning that all the available skills and the previous site had been used. It was closing. The protagonist returns to the real world and says that it was very real. It even seemed that they had really hit him. He looks at his glasses wondering what that really was because it was very strange. And the scene cuts to his school, the teacher's room. The teacher says that he did not how to console him. Then the protagonist gets up while the teacher says that it is finally lunchtime. So that's why he should eat to get stronger. As he walks, he hears those two extras saying the same thing. The one in the white shirt asks him to pass him and ends up asking why he never passes him. He insults him, but the other one says that he is bad and does not know how to play, calling him sick. Then, the protagonist realizes what is happening and sees those two fighting, repeating the same things as before. He looks up suddenly, jumps back, and that brick ends up hitting him in front of him. The three above begin to laugh and comment by looking at the protagonist that his father finally died, congratulating him. The protagonist sees that brick and realized that he could see the future. Obviously, he returns home, desperate, said that he could see the future and ended up opening the door. He claimed that he could really see it and could also predict it. He turned to his virtual glasses by pressing the power button, but realized that it did not work. It was also said that yes, that was correct, that he was not in the night and that the night before, when he called, it was already night. After a while, the night had already fallen and he could finally call. While the hologram said that the previous sight was beginning, he realized that it was his father and asked what would happen now. But the hologram said that that command was strange and realized that it made no sense to try to speak because the hologram did not work. He ended up saying that he had leveled up and congratulations again. He said that he had finally reached level 3, realizing that he had leveled up quickly, acknowledging that he leveled up quickly, and asked if he could use better skills. The protagonist mentions as an example knowing the numbers of the lottery in advance, even data such as stock prices or cryptocurrencies. But the hologram simply says that the command is unknown, and the protagonist says it's okay. But asked what is it with level 3, the hologram simply says that the skills available are the previous sight of 5 minutes of the worst that will happen the next day. The protagonist realizes that there is 1 minute left for 5 and ends up asking him to show him this vision. His vision is distorted and returns to the place where he was in the classroom. Some guys ask him what he was saying, and at that moment they said that protagonist said that they would do it now and that he already knew. One of them approaches the protagonist and asks him if he already knew what was going to happen at that moment, when he simply punched him in the stomach and said he didn't think that because he didn't even try to dodge it. One of them asked if he will vomit, and one of them asked why he wasn't breathing. The one wearing the black shirt asks if he was there. He says he was just a bastard and ends up fainting a little. He returns to the present and wonders if he would really die from a blow to the stomach. Breathing, the one wearing the black shirt asks if he was there. He says he was just a bastard and ends up fainting a little. He returns to the present and wonders if he would really die from a blow to the stomach on the next morning, until the system notifies him that he was leaving the TR level and that he could use the skill training 5 times. He asks what this training is and what it means to train. The system tells him that he can practice 5 times, that he must use that control in the form of a glove in both hands to train. He asks, "Am I there?" The system tells him that his first training was beginning and the scene cuts to. He returns to that room while they ask what that boy just said and the boy asks if he knew what was going to happen at that moment and the punch went straight to his stomach. But in the last moment he manages to defend himself, manages to stop that blow, and that boy is surprised. And one who was sitting in the chair asks what he was doing and said that if he doubted, the priest also wanted to hit him. And that boy gets very nervous asking if he was really going to stop his blow and asks him to try again, and that's it. He was preparing another blow until that punch hits him in the face and tells the priest to never do it again. That calling him an idiot and simply begins to hit him until he faints, and the system tells him that only. There were 4 training modes left and the protagonist was lying on the ground, saying that it hurt him and asking why that training had as much pain as real life. That if it didn't hurt, it wouldn't be practically like real life. So he asks to start another and then another. Finally, he goes to the classroom and sits there until those 3 arrive. One of them says that he is always bored during the break, while another says that he has an idea. He says it's just to play a little with Chum. He raises his hand, calling Sunu, who ends up looking at him and him. He asks what that was. He asks if he was really ignoring him. He raises his hand and asks if he had already forgotten about his friends. He says he would hit him if he didn't answer, but the protagonist asked him to leave because he was not scared at all, and that boy is surprised. He said he already knew what was going to happen and he did not have to be scared, until the one on the left says that he is completely crazy, he doesn't even know what he is saying. While on the right they said that he said, who already knew that they would do this that day. That boy approaches the protagonist asking if that was true. He squeezes his fists and asks if he knew what was going to happen at that moment, and at the moment he throws the blow. He simply blocks that boy. He is surprised and asked how he did it, while the other one asks if he was going to let the prota hit him at that moment. He gets very nervous and says that he would not stop him at that moment. Again, he would throw another punch, and the protagonist said that first it was a blow to the left, and when he was going to hit the protagonist, he dodges and says that at that moment it was going to be a kick. He can also avoid it. The boys start laughing, asking that he was doing the protagonist, and the other one with the white shirt gets quite nervous. He asks that he was doing the protagonist. He really asked if he wants to fight against him. He seemed to love him, and Silver begins to think that at that moment he was going to hit him.